Hello, I'm Kathtrin Schick. I'm the director of the Voice Network, and I'm pleased to be here to represent 83 humanitarian NGOs who are all based in Europe and who are active in humanitarian aid worldwide. Now, why do we talk about NGOs? NGOs, many of you know from the streets when they collect money, when they are on the television, when there are earthquakes, but also when there are conflicts, floods in Syria, in Central African Republic, but also in Ukraine and in the Philippines. So humanitarian aid is different from development aid because humanitarian aid actually is about saving lives immediately in the very short term. And 60 to 80% of all humanitarian aid which is delivered by NGOs. NGOs are non-governmental organizations. They are supposed to be independent from government, but many of them, of course, get their funding from the European public, but also from governments, from the European Commission, from US, and from foundations. So that's a bit about NGOs in general, and why are we delivering so much of the humanitarian aid? We are doing it because we have a lot of comparative advantage in relation to our colleagues, because it's not just NGOs alone. To be fair, the Red Cross movement and the UN are also the traditional deliverers of humanitarian aid together with the NGOs. And altogether, we are considered the humanitarian actors, even if business, military, and other actors, civil protection, they are also more and more engaged, especially in natural conflict, and they have to be complementary to humanitarian aid. But back to NGOs and their added value. NGOs are present in most countries in the world where there are people who suffer, either through development projects, human rights projects, or through humanitarian aid. That's what we are focusing on here. Now, NGOs are often more flexible and they are faster. They are probably also cheaper than many other actors who want to be active in the humanitarian field, because as you all know from the media, from the newspapers, humanitarian needs are increasing because of changing weather conditions, more population, many other reasons. We are seeing more and more catastrophes where people have to flee, where people's livelihood is threatened. And this is a big problem, so there is enough to do for everybody, but there is of course also a lot of money involved. So humanitarian aid is a sector in the growth, but we who work in it would really wish that it is a sector in the decrease, but we are far from that. We are also very close to affected populations. Most of our members work actually in countries already long before a disaster hits. And it is when you have been there that you are also able to do maybe the best work, because often it is the affected people first, especially in natural disasters, who are actually the ones who are first to aid their landsmen. And I think this close partnership with local civil society is also something which is for us the biggest challenge, to strengthen that and to develop that in the future. One thing which is very important for us is really the issue of that we are professionals. There are many volunteers who support our work, but we are professionals, and this is what is very important, because we have different specializations. You have people who work in health, you have people who are specialized on shelter, you have people who are working in medical services or medical assistance, water and sanitation. These are some of the main areas where humanitarians work. And this is important because that expertise ensures also that we can cover all the different needs which we find in the field, because different people in the field have different needs. So this is something which we have worked on for a long time also, to constantly improve the quality of our work, to seek effectiveness and to seek ever better quality of the work we deliver and accountability to the people we help. And this is important because many people say that, oh, I give money, but how do I know that it reaches? If you are a professional organization, then if you give it to a professional organization, you should be pretty sure the money will reach the people who need it and in the best manner. And that is what we as a network work for. And we think it's very important because actually humanitarian aid is also a direct expression of the active solidarity of the Europeans with people who are affected. We have also floods, we have also earthquakes, we have also conflicts in our region. So we have a solidarity with people who suffer the same fate. Now I would like to come a bit to voice. We are a network of 83 NGOs, and they are all active in humanitarian assistance, in protection of people who are affected by conflict, and also active in advocacy. And that's what we work the most on. And I think it's important today that humanitarian assistance, protection, and advocacy go together, because while we work according to humanitarian principles, that we should be impartial, independent, and neutral, at the same time, we have to engage with politicians, with decision makers, because if we don't do that, then people will not understand why humanitarian aid assistance is so important, how it should be done, and why it should be kept out of global foreign policies. Because if one uses humanitarian policy for political purposes, then aid workers are put in danger. And we have seen many examples of that over the last years especially. So as Voice, we work especially on advocacy, and we work on advocacy towards the European Union. And that means the European Parliament, the European Commission, and also the member states. All our members are based in member states, in Sweden, in Spain, in Czechia, in the UK, in France, in Germany, and Netherlands. More than 18 countries are represented in our network. And that is the excitement of working in such a network, because we are actually bringing together the experiences, the expertise from all these organizations working in different countries, in different crises all over the world, but at the same time also working together towards the decision makers and towards the donors, because often these are the same. The European Union with ECHO is one of the main donors actually of humanitarian aid globally. And luckily for NGOs, they work actually very much through NGOs, the UN and the Red Cross. We have tried now for 1 year to really work together at European level with our members in Brussels, with our secretariat, to make member states understand how important it is that money is there on a predictable basis. We cannot help people in the field when they are threatened on their life or when they really need food and shelter, when we don't know if the money is going to come in half a year or next year, or we have to pre-finance it. So there we have an issue that we have really worked on. We wrote to the finance ministers in the different member states. We spoke to parliamentarians. We had meetings among ourselves in the different countries in Europe to see how we could strategize, how we could influence our politicians. And that is something which worked so well that now we have done it over 1 year, and it's not easy to lobby for something like this for a year, because you might get bored, you might not see your successes. But now it actually looks that the money which is needed for having a good budget for the EU for humanitarian aid in 2015 and also to end the program for 2014 actually is something which will come, and we are very proud that we think that we have contributed a lot to that. Finally politicians took that right decision. So many people think we are about money. Of course, when we are working with people whose life is in danger and we are trying to help them, then money becomes extremely important. But we work also on policy, because the European Union has created the European Consensus for Humanitarian Aid, and that's a policy framework which everybody in the European Union should be proud of, because it really stipulates how humanitarian aid should be done. And humanitarian aid is about the field and helping, but humanitarian aid is also about disaster risk reduction, about prevention, about trying to actually put in place measures so that the impact of crisis gets less serious for people in the countries where these emergencies happen. Now, we work very actively on that. Our members think that when they come together in working groups around DRR, for example, they have increased opportunities to influence, for example, the negotiations for the new action plan for Hyogo on climate change, and also in relation to the World Humanitarian Summit, which is coming up in some years, and in relation, for example, to how the European consensus is implemented. Through reinforced collective messages, we can, in a way, all use the same messaging all over Europe, and that makes, of course, also that we are heard better, because if we all make clear that access to refugees in Syria is impossible and that something has to be done, we are better heard than if we all work alone through our different channels of communication. Another issue is that we are also having increased capacities to influence, but we can actually also share good practices among us. If I'm sitting in Sweden and I'm having that and that kind of relation with my government, it might be that this relation is very different than the relation of Italian NGOs with their government, and it is often very useful to exchange good practices among the different countries, the different members we have in the different states, so that they actually can also learn from each other, and together we are a stronger voice. That's the whole purpose of a network. We are based in Brussels, and we also, one thing we have to do is, of course, to digest all the information which comes from Brussels, but also which comes from the national level. So we travel often to visit our members and discuss with them, and to filter the information from the European institutions so that in a way it becomes relevant for our members at national level, but also in the field. That's a very important work which we as a secretariat have. We also work a lot together with other NGOs, other humanitarian actors, the Red Cross, the UN, and other networks, in order to enhance our voice even more. We also organize events, for example, on the World Humanitarian Summit, on disaster risk reduction, on the importance of the consensus, all these issues to discuss together, to develop our common understanding, our common position, and make NGOs visible. Because even when we are very far from the field in Brussels and in Europe at national level, we are all mainly present in the field, and we are all there because we work with our partners, we work at local level with affected populations. And this might sometimes look very far away in the policies, but what we believe is that you need to work in the field, you have to work at national level in the countries which have to help their populations, and you have to work in Europe with the donors so that they understand also what is needed in the field. First of all by the affected populations, but also by the actors who are working together with them, such as NGOs. Thank you.